Happy Halloween! It's time for the big one. Hello and welcome back to the channel. Yes, that's right, it is Halloween day. Happy Halloween everyone, and it is time for the ultimate end of pumpkin beer celebration, I guess. This was pretty much the bougiest one I could find this year that at least I hadn't already reviewed on previous years, and this is a collab between two breweries that on their day can make some very incredible beer. Those two breweries are of course S43 and Brew York. I've had beer from both of them before, I've reviewed beer from both of them before, and I've had beers from both of them before that I've said are scintillating. But I've also had beers from both of them that I've said are not, so this will be interesting. This beer is called Pumpkin Lure of the Dark Side Imperial Pumpkin Spice Latte Stout at 8.7%. Safe to say, if anything, it should be interesting. Before we break into it then, here is a quick look at the can. I mean, it's got a lovely textured kind of purple wrap that is a little reminiscent, it has to be said, of a certain coffee chain's coffee cups. I'm sure that is entirely intentional with the whole pumpkin spice latte deal, and as we turn the can around you get more of that, a little bit of info on the back which we'll go into later, but otherwise it's a simple but very effective design. Of course I will be using my Twisted Hops stemmed Allegra for this because this is just the best for big, heavy, boozy, intense beer tasting, I guess. Good aroma, even at this distance. It smells sweet, spicy, and a bit pumpkin-y. In the glass then, I mean, it's as dark as you like. The heads ran away quicker than them kids that egged your house earlier. If I hold it up to the light, oh, it's a properly jet black, oil black beer, this one. There is no light bleeding through there whatsoever. There's not a lot to describe. There's no head, and it is just darkness. So, let's get into it. First up, the aromas. It's punchy, very pumpkin heavy, very spice heavy, as you would imagine. Getting more cinnamon and nutmeg on this one. Nutmeg is a spice that appeared in a couple of the previous pumpkin video reviews I did, or pumpkin beer review videos I did, and to be honest, what came up on the labels but never much in the taste or the aroma. In this one it is very much present. It's pure cinnamon and nutmeg. The ginger's not really there, the vanilla's not really there. There's big roastiness of course, and to say how big and how strong, what I'm expecting to be a big, huge overload of flavour. It's got a cleanness to it, and the coffee element is actually quite subdued. It is there, don't get me wrong, but yeah, I thought they might go a bit harder on the coffee front. It's very fresh, it's all about that pumpkin, fresh veg, kind of, well, fresh veg is probably the wrong word, but that earthy, vegetative and spice combo is what most of the nose really is about. There's a little bit of confectionery sweetness in there, it's a bit syrupy. A little bit of black treacle, but really that is about it. So let's do this. Happy Halloween everyone. Cheers. Very, very different to the previous beers. Wow. Now, due to the strength of this, I'm going to take my time a little bit and have a sit back and reflect on what's just happened there. The previous two pumpkin flavoured beers, or pumpkin spice flavoured beers, that I reviewed this year were both on a similar level. They were both basically spice infused pales, one without pumpkin, one with. The one with pumpkin was a lot better. This is something completely different. This is a coffee stout, imperialised, i.e. taken right up top, and then thrown heaps of pumpkin spice flavour at. Now, I don't know whether there's pumpkin in this or not. Based off the flavour at this point, I want to say there is. I feel like there is some of that nice, sweet but vegetative kind of pumpkin flesh in that. Probably in puree form, but you know, the real deal still. And it's got luscious mouthfeel initially, but it's not too sticky. I'd still say it's maybe slightly on the thin side for an Imperial Stout, but really, when you're looking for mouthfeel, it's all about what you get up front, and that on this is very, very good. Thankfully, in some ways, it's not too thick because, well, often that leaves your mouth just coated and feeling a bit oversweet and sickly. It is on the thin side, but for whatever reason, it really, really works with just the dynamics of, well, I don't know how they've done it, but liquid dynamics. We're getting a little bit technical for this channel now, but it's super silky as well. It's really smooth, not very carbonated, as I approve of in this style. I do not want a carbonated Imperial Stout any day of the week. And yet, despite all of those very intense seasonal specific spices, I'm still getting a bit of a rich, almost Black Forest Gatto-y vibe that you often get just out of a straight up Imperial Stout, which is also quite interesting. Right then, let's do it. Quick top to bottom taste test to find out exactly what is going on in here. So initially, really mild carbonation, sweet, slick, gorgeous mouthfeel right at the front of the tongue. First part of your palate, it's again sweet, very light coffee, and actually very welcoming. It's not intensive at that point. It's got heaps of little notes of this, there, and everywhere. It's clearly a blend of things, but it's not overwhelming, which is nice. Mid-palate, that's where stuff really starts to get interesting. You start to get roastiness, a bit more coffee, but still in the flavour. The coffee is still limited. To say, well, it's meant to be a latte of sorts, then I would have liked more coffee. At the same time, though, those style coffee drinks, the pumpkin spice latte of various famous coffee houses, actually doesn't taste that coffee at all. So maybe they've actually got it spot on. A few fruity notes start to creep in that mid palate as well. You start to get an idea for some of the spices to come, but also that deeper, richer, syrupy, almost Black Forest Gatto thing that I mentioned before. So that starts to creep in at that point. End of the palate really digs into that. They become more prominent. The coffee and actually the pumpkin spice element of this really starts to dry off a bit. It's really not very intense at that point. You get what I would consider a very nice, a very good, a very fruity Imperial Stout, which isn't what I'd expect. There are hints of cinnamon and nutmeg at that point, actually, and how I kind of reevaluate. But yeah, it's still kind of fruity to say. However, aftertaste is where a lot of this stuff really starts to blow up. Huge amounts of cinnamon, nutmeg. A tiny bit of heat in there, so I suspect there is some ginger in there somewhere. A bit of that sweet, fleshy pumpkin flavour. And you're left with just a touch of dry coffee roastiness, which is actually probably very reminiscent of, well, the real deal, a pumpkin spice latte. So, I have to say, it's quite strong. I am enjoying it a lot. I will let you know where this ranks amongst the other pumpkin beers I had this week at the end, but I'm not disappointed. Anyway, let's take a look at the can. On the front of the can then, it says S43 Brewery in Brew York, Pumpkin Pumpkin, Lure of the Dark Side, Imperial Pumpkin Spice Latte Stout at 8.7%. On the side of the can it says, store between 2 and 6 degrees in a fridge, obviously. I mean, that's a bit sassy considering I'm pretty sure they export all over Europe, and some places in Europe will be that temperature outside. I don't know why it has to be in the fridge, but anyway, they're clearly feeling knocked off on that day. It says produced and packaged in the UK at S43. So this was done at S43 and not at Brew York, which is interesting. It says, what's in your can? The hops are Hercules, which I'm not particularly familiar with, actually. It says, drink fresh. This was canned on the 28th of September this year. For reference, it's, well, this is being filmed a couple of days before Halloween, but it's effectively Halloween. But I've had it in my fridge for 2 weeks, so it was pretty damn fresh when I bought it. The malts are Pale Munich Oats, Special B, Crystal Dark, Crystal LT, not sure what that is, chocolate, roasted barley, the yeast is English ale yeast, and the extras are lactose, which explains that very slick mouthfeel, pumpkin, yes, there is definitely some pumpkin in there, spices, single origin coffee beans, and cold brew coffee. That does surprise me a little bit. We'll get back onto the ingredients in a second though. There's 4.2 UK units in this 440ml can. It's not vegan friendly, of course, because of the lactose, but it is vegetarian friendly. It also says, save the duckies, recycle cans. Of course, of course. It also says, may contain sediment. You'll never know because it's possibly the darkest beer I've ever reviewed. And that is about that. And it says, brewed with Fika coffee beans. So I don't know who Fika are, presumably a roaster, coffee roaster. But yeah, so just going back to that, it's got single origin coffee beans and cold brew coffee in it. Now, sure, they might have dialed back on it so you got more of a breathy coffee experience and not a strong one. But see, it's interesting. Now I've just gone back to it there. There's a coffee hit in the middle that just spikes and then disappears very quickly again. And it is quite intense. So, starting to open up on the nose now. It's getting very boozy, thick, treacly. It's almost like sticking your nose in a brandy. It's that kind of sensation. And there is, just before the swallow, a much breathier coffee experience than I was getting before. I suspect that there's a lot of strong flavours in this, and if you drink it too quickly, those are the only ones you're going to get. So, as is the intention with an Imperial Stout, I would recommend you take your time over it, sip it throughout a nice, scary Halloween film, or any other film of your choice, and just appreciate a few little nuances. But anyway, what do I really think of this beer? Well, it is an Imperial Stout. It's not the strongest Imperial Stout, and to be honest for that, I'm slightly grateful. Its body, its mouthfeel, and everything else does kind of match the ABV, so it's not super luxe because it's not super strong, even though it is fairly potent. And I have to say, it is a completely different approach to a pumpkin spice beer than the others I've had, which I'm also quite thankful for because, well, I've had a couple and they do start to get repetitive after a while. I will say I don't think it's the best Imperial Stout I've ever had by a long way, but it's also far from the worst. It's actually quite an approachable one. If you're so-so on Impies and kind of, you know when you like one, you really like it, but then you go and buy something else and you go, it's just too much, it's too intense, I can't deal with it. You're not going to have that problem here. It has heaps of flavour, but it's all very well balanced, and that really is always the important thing. Now, how does it stack up against the others? Well, I think it was fairly obvious from my previous videos, and for those that haven't seen them, the first review in this Halloween series that was a pumpkin beer was from Fierce. It was their pumpkin spice latte ale, and it was pretty much exactly the same description from the beer from Abbeydale, which was the video before this one. I made it quite clear in that Abbeydale video I thought the Abbeydale beer was better, and it was very, very good. Given the choice on Halloween night, if I could only pick one, I'm torn. What I really want is 2 cans or 3 cans of the Abbeydale and then a can or 2 of this one. Truthfully, they're pretty much level pegging. The Abbeydale one is a bit more pumpkin heavy. This one feels a little bit more like a treat, like an event, and it's probably better sat down and enjoyed over a long period of time with a film. But yeah, I do rate it. I definitely will buy it again next year. And that's really all I can say about it. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you haven't already, subscribe, if you would be so kind. And go and enjoy your Halloween night. Cheers.